Shalom, family. Welcome back to the Semitic Jew channel, where we read scriptures as Israelites through culture, covenant, and context. Today, we begin a New Testament series with the first book, the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew is often misunderstood because people read it through a Western Christian lens. But when you read it as it was originally intended for the house of Israel, everything becomes more clear, more powerful, and more consistent with the Torah. Let's get into it. 1. Matthew opens with an Israelite identity. Matthew chapter 1. Matthew wastes no time telling you who this message is for and what the story is about. The very first verse says, "The book of the generations of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham." Matthew chapter 1, verse 1. Now, why mention Abraham and David? Because Abraham represents the covenant promises of a chosen people, the Israelites. Genesis chapter 17. David represents the royal throne that was promised to Israel in 2 Samuel chapter 7. Matthew is signaling this book is about the fulfillment of prophecies made exclusively to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, not the Romans, not the Greeks, not the Europeans, not the Africans, only Israel. 2, the mission of the Messiah is Israel first. Matthew chapter 1 through Matthew chapter 4. Even the angel tells Joseph in Matthew chapter 1 verse 21, he shall save his people from their sins. Who are his people? Israel, not the nations, not everybody, not the so-called Jewish people or the Jewish man, Jewish woman of today, because anyone can become Jewish, just like anyone can become Christian. So Yahushua is specifically talking about his people. He even quotes Deuteronomy and Isaiah, who are Israelite prophets. His baptism fulfilled righteousness within the covenant, and his temptation mirrors Israel's 40 years in the wilderness. Everything is coded about Israelite history. 3, the Sermon on the Mount is covenant law for Israelites, Matthew chapter 5 through Matthew chapter 7. And Christians claim that Jesus came to do away with the law, or to put the law aside, or to add to the law. But Matthew destroys that idea. Yahushua says in Matthew chapter 5, verse 17, "Think not that I have come to destroy the law, but to fulfill it." So he didn't abolish the Torah, he clarified it. He taught Israelites how to live as the righteous remnant during oppression. That means no hatred among brethren, no adultery, no revenge cycles, no hypocritical clarity, no Gentile prayer rituals, no Gentile customs. The Sermon on the Mount is Israelite ethics under covenant. 4, Matthew shows the Messiah gathering the lost sheep, Matthew chapter 8 through Matthew chapter 12. By chapter 10, Jesus makes his mission explicit. Go not into the way of the Gentiles, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And that is found in Matthew chapter 10, verse 5 to 6. So this is the Messiah returning Israel to God, just as prophesied in the Old Testament, Isaiah 49, Jeremiah 31, Ezekiel 34. And why? Because Israel is spiritually sick. And guess what? Oppressed, in slavery perpetually, enslaved across all nations, and scattered. The Messiah acts as the good shepherd who restores his people. They don't have time to create a new religion. There is no new religion. 5, Matthew exposes Israel's corrupt leadership, Matthew chapter 12 through Matthew chapter 23. A major theme is conflict with the Pharisees, the religious elite who corrupted the law through man-made traditions. They were adding to the law. They had no respect for it because they weren't, some of them weren't Israelites. Yahushua calls them out. You have made the covenant of God of none effect by your tradition. That's found in Matthew chapter 6. Matthew is showing Israelites, hey, your leaders are not righteous. Your leaders have added to the law. Your leaders have become gatekeepers of oppression. In other words, you have people in Israel that are helping the other nations oppress you. In Matthew chapter 23, he pronounces 7 woes, showing Israel why judgment was coming on Jerusalem. 6, parables. The parables reveal the fate of Israel. Matthew chapter 13 through Matthew chapter 25. Jesus' parables are often interpreted as universal Christian stories. And that's fine. You can get something from the stories, but Matthew tells you the purpose, because it is given unto you, speaking of the Israelites, to know the mysteries of the kingdom. But to them, it is not given. Matthew chapter 13, verse 11. So you, being the Israelites, and them also being Israel's corrupt leadership, the unbelieving majority. So the parables teach the separation of righteous Israelites from the wicked Israelites, the restoration of Israel's remnant, the judgment on the nation for rejecting the Messiah, and the coming of the kingdom that is ruled by Jesus, the Son of David. The Olivet Discourse, which Christians refer to, Matthew chapter 24 through 25, it warns of the persecution of Israelites. And tribulation is coming. Captivity is also coming. You can read about that in Luke chapter 21, verse 24. The fall of Jerusalem, and also the regathering of the elect, Matthew chapter 24, verse 31. Now, elect is a term that was exclusively used to the children of Israel only in the Old Testament. And keep in mind, there was no New Testament when these books were written. 7, the death and resurrection are covenant promises, Matthew chapter 26 or through Matthew chapter 28. At the Passover feast, Yahushua, Jesus says, "This is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many," Matthew chapter 26, verse 28. Many refers to the same group Isaiah was referring to in Isaiah chapter 53, where it calls many the Israelites. His death fulfills Isaiah 53, Psalm 22, Daniel 9, Zechariah 12, and he rises with all power after his resurrection and then gives this command: go teach all nations, Matthew chapter 28, verse 19. Now, Christians use this to claim a universal mission, but we can trace the origin of Christianity and see how it was used to colonize and even to perpetuate a false image of Christ in the earth. That's deception. But Matthew uses the same phrase, all nations, earlier to describe Israel being scattered among all nations. Matthew chapter 24, verse 14, Deuteronomy 28, verse 64. So this does not mean that the world should not learn the Bible, but that it is not what is being said here. The mission is go to where Israel has been scattered, teach them their covenant identity, baptize them in the name of the restored kingdom, not evangelize only Europe, and not create a new religious identity, restore the house of Jacob. The closing message: the Gospel of Matthew is not the beginning of a new religion. It is the continuation of the story of Israel. It shows the Israelite Messiah, who was sent to his people to fulfill the prophecies according to his coming and according to his people, to restore Israelite identity and to gather Israel's scattered children back to covenant relationship. If you want the book of Matthew to make sense, you must read it through the lens of the covenant people it was written to. If this breakdown brought clarity, hit like and subscribe, and share this with someone who thinks the New Testament isn't Israelite focused. The next episode is the book of Mark, the power and the authority of the Israelite Messiah. Shalom, family, and I'll see you in the next lecture.